We have completed the cycle count program, concluding with page 18 of the notebook. The screen format that you are looking at right now is some of the data that we have discussed on page 18. And that particular screen format is in your notebook and is identified as page 18-1. This is the information that you should consider in processing or when processing the individual daily cycle count forms. And one of the things that I want to make note of, again, as I did when we reviewed page 18, and that is the third line from the top, quantity on hand by locations is hand-powered onto the cycle count form. Now, the quantity on hand by locations can be an integral part of the screen capture information. But when the cycle count form is printed out, that is left blank, and that is what the cycle counter or cycle counters will fill out after they do their cycle counting by individual part number. Now, to support your storeroom layout, I want to address the next two pages, pages 19 and 20, and this should help you to establish where your various commodities are going to be stored. That is going to be accomplished on page number 19, and then page 20 is how they're going to be stored relative to the physical requirements of storage. So let's start off at the top of page number 19 and address each and every item. And I'll elaborate on the items as we go through them. Item 1 is the spare parts by commodity code. Commodity is the family code. Remember, it's the first field, generally the first 2 digits of the part number. So we can therefore have an overview layout looking down, let's say, at an overview to indicate where various commodities are going to be stored. If you remember when we were talking about transaction volumes, what we can do with those transaction volumes is to try and keep the high commodity transactions, that's a summary of all of the part numbers within a commodity code or within a family. Summarize all of the part numbers transactions and try and have all of the commodities, where practical in a storeroom, as close to the issue cage as possible. Generally what we do is we take the storeroom and kind of break it into 3 sections. The first section, closest to the issue cage, would be the high volume commodities. The middle section would be the medium volume commodities, and then the low volume commodities would be at the back of the storeroom. When it comes to putting the individual part numbers into specific storage bins and the like, then we would look at the high volume part numbers to be stored somewhere in the middle of the storage bins, the medium part number usage in the lower portion, and then the upper portion would have the low usage. So the layout is done 1 by commodity and then storage bin by individual part number transactions. 2, a staging area for planned maintenance work orders. 3 vendor stocking program items. 4, we would have the bench stock. That's our 2-bin system items. 5 is the extra security items, the bonded crib within the storeroom. 6, vendor consigned material in. And here again, we'd want to make sure that we are covered by an insurance carrier for the value of those items. Likewise, 7, engineered project items. Now, those items are generally owned by the company. But 8, the contractor items, are owned by the contractor, but we have, again, a financial legal responsibility for loss. So here again, we would want to make certain that we are financially covered by an insurance carrier. Now, item 9 would be unique, special machinery items that are not part of a family. Sometimes we may have items that are not part of an inventory class code. They're not part of a commodity, and they may be used by, let's say, facility engineering on future projects, but they're not part of a project at this point in time. Generally, an area for those items would be at the rear of the storeroom. 10 would be special lubricants. 11 is janitorial supplies. 12 is the tools that are going to be used by the maintenance personnel. And 13 is the equipment that's going to be used by maintenance personnel. 14 are those special environmental requirements. And 15 would be the inspection tools and gauges that are going to be used, not in receiving inspection, but to be issued against maintenance work orders. Then we would have item number 16, the safety items, and 17 would be the inventory class code 1 items. Remember those emergency type items. And then we would get into 18, the shipping supplies to support the shipping function. 19 is the shelf life codes. Now, those shelf life coded items do not have to be in a separate area. They can be right in with the material that they're an integral part of that family. However, what we're indicating here is that those items have to have shelf life codes in their item master record. And then we may have some obsolete material on hand pending disposition. So we'd have to have a little staging area for that. Material handling equipment that's used not only within the storeroom, but to transport material to the job site. We have 22, the counting equipment that's required within the storeroom. 23, packaging equipment, and 24 and so forth would be additional commodities. So you could see we have provided you with a very comprehensive list of all of the major commodities that at least we have identified up to this point in time. Now, if you would turn to page 20, what we want to do is talk about the storage of those commodities within the storeroom. So here we're talking about the layout consideration relative to storing commodities. Item 1 would be the storage area for all commodities. That would probably take the bulk of the entire storeroom itself. The storage facilities, which identifies the racks, the shelving, the cantilevers that are required, the bins, and anything else. And those, if you remember, can be coded, and we could develop the coding system relative to what bin by size number items are going to go into. Item 3 addresses the aisles. And in many cases, what we want to do is to consider one-way aisles to minimize the aisle space. Remember, aisle space is extremely expensive because when you stand in an aisle and look up, you're looking at nothing but cubic displacement that is not being used in the storeroom. The name of the game is to get maximum utilization out of cubic displacement in a storeroom. Next, we would have the receiving area in 4, the shipping, the receiving inspection area in 5, and 6 would be the shipping area. Then, where is the issue counter, or there could be more than one issue counter required. 8 addresses the security devices to make certain that the storeroom is secure at all times. 9 is the counting equipment, and where is it going to be maintained, and some of it may be mobile so that we can move it from one bin location to another. 10 is the material handling equipment, and now 11 gets into some of the structure of the storeroom itself, such as fire protection equipment, but that not only pertains to, let's say, overhead sprinklers, but also to various fire protective devices like the canisters that may be placed in different locations throughout the storeroom. And then 12 addresses the data processing applications, such as is the platform or computer going to be retained in a storeroom in a small organization, or is it going to be retained, let's say, in the maintenance supervisor's office, or have a special office by itself. Terminals and printers, and then barcode applications within the storeroom. Packaging equipment to support the shipping function. And then there's a need for office space. And if you want a self-contained storeroom, then we should consider a locker area for the storeroom personnel, maybe the storeroom lunch and rest period area. Again, this is basically up to you and your management. And where we do consider self-contained storerooms, then we have to consider the sanitation facilities that are required within the storeroom. And then item 18 addresses those additional requirements. So you could see between pages 19 and 20, we are providing you with a great deal of data to support your maybe relayout or to establish a new storage bin system. So please use these documents and the data in there to support your storeroom program. Now the last exhibit in this page, or this section, excuse me, page number 21, pertains to the part numbering program. And we do have a one-day seminar that addresses the entire part numbering program from beginning to end, including all of the documentation. But since we've been talking about part numbers and the commodity or the family code, I thought it would behoove us to at least put some information in this storeroom section relative to a very simplistic outline that would make up a part numbering system. And it goes something like this. The first step is to develop the part number program. And that has to do with the organization of the part number program, and that is the people that are going to support the program. And those would be representatives of every craft within the organization, plus the people that are in the storeroom, in inventory, purchasing, and planning and scheduling, plus facilities engineering if you have that, and maintenance supervision. There's training required to train the people in terms of what the part number program is going to require in terms of their support. And then there are various forms and documents that have to be developed and likewise made available to develop the part number and the descriptions for each and every commodity, and then subsequently for each part within the commodity or family. Step number 2 is to develop the part number data, and that is the part number format and criteria, and B, the part number description, format, and criteria. Let me address format and criteria. Format is the number of digits in the part number. It also represents the field sizes and the number of fields within the part number. And criteria is the identification that each one of those field sizes would represent. And that is true for both the part number as well as it is the description. Item number 3 is the implementation of the part number program itself, which means once we have started to develop the part numbers, we would want to have a cross-reference list from old to new and new to old. And then at some point in time, after all of the items in the storeroom have been identified with the new part number, the various source documents like the maintenance planning and scheduling requirements, which would include the equipment and the related spare parts lists, those would likewise have to be updated with the new part number. Then at that time, where we have all of the data elements converted from old to new, we can eliminate the old number and utilize the new number. And the part numbering program must be supported just like the maintenance management program has to be supported by an engineering change notice system, a new part notice system, and the obsolescence program. And again, I encourage you, if you are interested in pursuing the development of a new part numbering program in your facility, please feel free to request from the Meitz Institute when the next part numbering program is going to be available. Now, looking at the title page in Craft Capacity Planning, we're talking about Function Module 6. And as the first paragraph illustrates, this function of the Maintenance Management Program is to develop the craft capacity planning system. We have been talking up to this point about spare parts planning in Section 4, the Inventory Management Program. We've addressed the procurement program to support inventory management. We've discussed the storeroom program to support both inventory and purchasing. Now here, for the first time, we're going to address the requirement of the labor planning portion. And once we have developed the spare parts requirements and the labor planning, we're now in a position to institute maintenance work order planning and scheduling, which is going to be covered in section number 8. The second paragraph addresses exactly what I've indicated, that the craft capacity planning system is used in conjunction with the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system. That is the labor portion. And the third paragraph really is addressing the different types of craft capacity planning that we have to consider. We have, let's say, our own craft personnel, and those personnel can be identified by different craft codes. There may be a need in your operation to separate, let's say, journeymen from apprentices. And we also have to take into consideration where we're going to use machine operators in maintenance activities, that we have to address that capacity issue. Likewise, if we're doing any subcontracting, we also have to take into consideration let's say, the capacity requirements of subcontractors. And the fourth paragraph and the title page addresses the craft capacity planning system can provide craft capacity plans to any time period that is required. In other words, if I am in a multi-plant environment where we have multi-shifts, first, second, and third shift, and it's not a continuous process environment, because in most continuous process environments, we have the same complement of craft labor on each shift. But in a non-continuous process environment, we do not have, in general, we do not have the same complement of craft capacity on either the first, second, or third shift. So therefore, the craft capacity plan should accommodate multi-shift capacity requirements. Those can be rolled up into daily capacity plans, and the daily capacity plan can be rolled up or summarized into a weekly capacity plan. It is this flexibility that is required to do a better job of maintenance work order planning and scheduling. Now, if you would turn to the next page, which is the record layout page for craft capacity planning, I want to address again the data elements that are in here, as I have done in each previous section that had a record layout in there. I also want to make reference that these are our recommendations. Remember, you can adjust the data, the field sizes, the terminology, any way you so desire. Item A addresses the maintenance craft codes. In this case, we're identifying a 3-digit numeric number. Now, that 3-digit numeric number will support more than 100 different craft codes. I have worked with some companies where they had in excess of 3, and in a few cases more than 400 different employees in the maintenance operation. So those craft codes represent the ability to go up to 999 different employees in the craft operation. If you are not going to have more than 100, then in this case you can get by with a 2-digit number. Again, look at this material, review it, and tailor it for your own particular operation. Now, moving forward into the data elements of craft capacity planning, on page number 1, we have the data that is required to set up craft capacity planning. First of all, A is the craft name. Now, that is not the person's name. That is the craft name by function. An electrician, a mechanic, let's say a painter, a carpenter, so forth. B is the craft code number for that particular craft name. And we do have a list of some craft codes, which is on the next page for your review. There may be a need to where we have craft manning. That means more than one person. So in item C, we can have manning by one person, but we also have to consider groups. So 1 is the groups and 2 is the individuals. And the groups may be multi-craft groups, such as 1 electrician and 1 mechanic. So again, the craft coding is strictly a user-defined requirement. We have the shop calendar, and I addressed this earlier, where we have a week which can be broken down into days, and the days can be subdivided into shifts. Now the next three elements, E, F, and G, pertain to the input into the capacity planning formula. And we'll look at the craft capacity planning formula in a moment. Gross available capacity is time on the payroll, not time on the job. That's the payroll time. Item F, the capacity constraints consist of two data elements. First of all, we have what we call planned non-productive times. And we have an exhibit that addresses these, but I want to address those now. Startup time, rest periods, and cleanup time. And when you get into, let's say, a 3-shift operation, there may be a paid lunch period time. Those non-productive times must be reduced from item G, the gross available capacity. And then the difference between the total capacity, the gross, minus the capacity constraints, you may want to consider utilizing what we call craft efficiency, which is a percentage figure. This could be a very sensitive area for many companies, and if you do not want to go into efficiency analysis, but you can as a byproduct of labor reporting, and that could be retained strictly in the system for planners and schedulers and for maintenance supervisors to review, then you should incorporate a consistent figure of 100%. So that means everybody is working at the same level of efficiency. And G is the end result, which is the net planned available capacity. So those data elements in E, F, and G comprise the craft capacity requirements, and they're used in the craft capacity formula. And again, item H pertains to any other additional information that you may require. The screen capture that you are looking at right now represents the data that we discussed on page 1 of section number 7 in the notebook. And that pertains to craft capacity planning. Without spending additional time going over the data in this particular screen format, I want to make reference to the craft name and the craft code number. Those are for the individual craft personnel. And when we get into individual craft personnel by name and by clock number, we will identify that information on another exhibit in this section of the notebook, and likewise another screen format. But this data is strictly to generate the various data elements for various craft names so that we can have the input developed properly for our craft capacity module in CMMS. Now moving on to the next page 2 and page 2A, we have the listing, as I indicated previously, on page 2 of the various craft codes. Now we have listed a total of 24 different craft codes. Now you could pick and choose based upon the craft requirements that are in your particular maintenance organization. As I indicated on page number 2 of the notebook, we have provided you with a rather extensive list of various craft names and some craft coatings. Now, the next screen format identifies the craft code numbers that you can select based upon the specific crafts that you have in your organization. We are merely showing you a few craft code numbers from 01 to 08, and as you can see from the screen format, we are basically following the same craft coding that was provided to you on page 2 of the notebook. Here again, you have to tailor your craft code to maintain the data integrity tied in with the specific craft name. Now, as I had discussed earlier, these craft codes do not address, as an example, journeymen versus apprentices and other craft requirements. Now, moving to page 2A, some of the craft coding requirements for your consideration over and above the coding list that was on page 2 are as follows. The difference between 1, a journeyman, and 2, an apprentice, and 3, a trainee, 4, new hires, 5, teams, 1 electrician, 1 mechanic, and 5A, 5B is 2 mechanics, and 5C is any combination that is required. 6 addresses the participation of machine operators, 7 is contract labor, and 8 is others as required. And the note at the bottom of page 2A indicates that the maintenance craft code listing should be developed to support your specific craft PM work order requirements. Again, it is user defined. Now, the screen format that you are looking at represents the data elements that we covered on page 2A of the notebook, indicating some of the key craft coding requirements. And here we are providing you with the ability to now not only select the appropriate craft code by craft description, but now you can insert the individual craft employees' names and their clock numbers into a, I'll call it a craft item master record by employee. So in essence, what we have done is we have taken the list which is on page 2 of the notebook, and with the various different craft considerations which are on page 2A, you can now develop the cross-reference between the various craft requirements by your specific employees and their associated clock numbers. When you're through with this cross-referencing, you are now in a position to develop the specific craft capacity for each and every craft employee. Now, moving on to page number 3, here we are showing you the formula for craft capacity planning. And this is identical to the data elements that I reviewed for you on page 1. And let's go through the formula, and the data elements are listed below. NPAC is net planned available capacity. And that is equal to the difference of the gross planned available capacity, which is the payroll time, minus the capacity constraints, that's the allowable non-productive time, times an efficiency factor. This is a very simple formula to use in craft capacity planning. Now the screen format that you are looking at identifies the formula for net planned available capacity with the data elements for the formula, and those were discussed on page 3 in the notebook. Now, taking the data from your employee craft item master record from the previous page, you now have the ability to develop the capacity constraints and efficiency factor for each and every craft personnel in the maintenance organization. Now, moving on to page number 4, we are showing some of the craft capacity constraints that I alluded to before. These are known and these are authorized non-productive time periods, such as 1, startup time, 2, rest periods. In most cases there are 2, 1 for the first half of the shift and the second one for the second half of the shift. If we have a 3-shift operation, there could be, as I said, lunch periods that are paid that are non-productive. Then we would have cleanup time. Now, items 1 to 4 are the standard capacity constraints. But relative to the capacity plan itself, we have to take into consideration such things as training programs where certain craft personnel are not going to be available to perform a maintenance activity, and other planned non-maintenance times could be vacation periods. They could be historical absenteeism through sickness and any other application that would have an impact on the capacity plan. In other words, the capacity plan is developed by you, the user, and it should reflect the real world relative to available capacity. Now, moving on to the next page, we have a capacity planning example. It's not complicated, and capacity planning is an integral part of CMMS. All you have to do is to make certain you understand the formula that is in CMMS. You put in the various data elements and let the software do the calculation for you. But irrespective, here is how it works. We have a craft code 02, which is mechanic. We have 3 mechanics for this particular shift. We're working 8 hours per day. We have rest periods of 2 10-minute rest periods per day. So we're going to calculate the capacity requirements. Step number 1 is to get the gross payroll time. 3 employees times 8 hours per shift is equal to 24 hours. We're going to calculate the capacity constraints, which is 3 men or people at 20-minute rest periods per shift is equal to 1 hour. The net planned available capacity in this case is 24 hours minus 1 hour, or 23 hours. Now that is the net available planned capacity for those 3 mechanics. Now you're going to find when we move into the next section, section 8, on maintenance work order planning and scheduling, that you may not want to schedule immediately this, what I call net available plant capacity. If you do, in other words, if you schedule 23 hours a day, that is at 100% utilization. And that, from my experience, is totally unrealistic. So we're going to show you a variable craft capacity plan in section number 8, and we're going to show you how to actually select a starting craft capacity plan and ultimately increase the available capacity, which means you have the ability to put more and more work into that capacity plan until you bring that net available capacity up to what I would call the norm level of capacity utilization. And that's a point I wanted to make here in this section, and not have you think that we're going to automatically start off with 23 hours of craft capacity planning. Totally unrealistic. On the next exhibit on page 6, we have one additional illustration, and the data indicates that we have an electrician which has a craft code of 01. We have one electrician. We're working 8 hours a day. We have 2 15-minute rest periods, but we also, through history, have determined that this electrician is operating at 85% utilization or efficiency. So we're going to use now the efficiency factor in our formula. So we're going to look at the development of the gross planned capacity. And again, one person times 8 hours a shift is 8 hours of payroll time. 2, we have 2 15-minute rest periods. So we have 30 minutes of non-productive time. Now looking at the formula, in this case, we're adding the efficiency factor in. So we have a net available capacity of 8 hours, which is gross capacity, minus a half hour of capacity constraints times 0.85. That's at 85% efficient. And we go through the calculation, and in this case, we have a net available capacity for this electrician of 6 hours and 23 minutes. Now again, if we schedule this electrician for 6 hours and 23 minutes, we're scheduling that electrician at 100% utilization, recognizing that that electrician is operating at 85% efficiency. And again, we would be totally unrealistic if we were going to do that. So what I'd like to do now is to have you turn to page number 7, and we'll also look at page number 8. And these two exhibits demonstrates, if you will, from a Gantt chart standpoint, G-A-N-T-T. Some people would refer to this as a bar chart, where we have the different data elements for one 8-hour shift. The legend is down at the bottom, and I will look at the data elements relative to the legend and address those going from left to right. The first S is the startup time. That is non-productive time. Then we have AC, which is available capacity, so I could start scheduling to that. Then R1 is the first rest period. L is the lunch time, but in this case, it is not a capacity constraint because it is not going to be used in our gross available capacity, and therefore we move on to the right again, and we have the third AC available capacity. We show the second rest period by R2, and then we show the fourth available capacity, and then last we have the cleanup time required. So out of an 8.5-hour day where the employee may be available, that employee is getting paid 8 hours a day, and we actually are going to have the available capacity as shown on the following page, page number 8. And here we have those 4 time periods, the available capacity, and this represents a total of 7 hours and 15 minutes. Now, we're not going to block schedule maintenance work orders according to those 4 AC blocks, but we're merely trying to indicate that over a 8.5 hour period, we're going to have available at 100% utilization 7 hours and 15 minutes of available capacity. So we can replace those 4 individual AC blocks with 1 block and indicate for this person we're going to have 7 hours and 15 minutes of available capacity, again at 100% utilization. Now, I've indicated that when we get into planning and scheduling, we're going to talk about the utilization of the craft personnel. So on page number 9, I have developed for your review a utilization matrix from 95%, which is in step 3 on the left-hand column called percentage, down to 65% utilization. I'm working on the assumption that we have 7 hours and a half relative to the gross available capacity of 8 hours, and we've factored that down to 7.5 hours of available capacity, and therefore, based upon the percentage of utilization, I've converted that over into minutes, which is the second or the middle column, and then the right-hand column illustrates the actual number of hours and the associated minutes. Now, this illustration is starting off at 65% and it's migrating up to 95%. Now, I gave you a statistic relative to inventory turnover earlier in this seminar. And I said the average turnover of an average storeroom in a maintenance organization is from 0.93 to about 0.95 turns per year. In other words, it's less than 1 turn per year. The average utilization of craft personnel, as recorded by many studies made in the United States, indicates that out of a 7.5 hour shift, we're getting 30 to 33% of actual productivity out of that 7.5 hours. That means the actual productivity is slightly larger than 2 hours out of an 8-hour payday. So if you are in that area below, let's say 65%, then the matrix on page number 9 is not, meant for you. It is for those people that currently are at 65% and greater. So if you will turn to page number 10, we have another utilization matrix here, which brings us all the way down to 30% relative to the utilization, which in this case is on the right-hand column. And again, the minutes are all the way over on the left-hand column, and the capacity is in the right-hand column. The utilization of craft capacity planning is a judgment call to be made by maintenance supervision and planning and scheduling. And it is really up to the supervisor to determine, based upon this matrix on page 10, where you want to start your planning and scheduling relative to available craft capacity. If you're at 30 to 33%, then my recommendation is you should start somewhere around 45 to 50%. You'll pick up a few points when you start to do planning and scheduling. As you start to gain experience, where you now are utilizing craft labor more efficiently, even though you're at that lower utilization percentage, you could start to increase the available capacity by employee. You could likewise do that by craft code, and therefore you could start to develop more work during the same period of time through planning and scheduling. I recommend that your goal, and this is only my recommendation, should be somewhere around 80 to 85% utilization of all craft personnel that are working in the maintenance, work order, planning, and scheduling environment. What that means is if you're at 30 to 33% today and you moved up to 80 to 85%, you have more than doubled the workforce, but not by adding more people, but by getting more productivity from your people. And this is the key relative to craft capacity planning. Don't start off with a high utilization. It will be unrealistic. You won't meet the due dates on the work orders, and the planning and scheduling system is going to start to fall behind schedule. Again, my recommendation is to start off low, somewhere around 45 to 50%, if you are at the 30 to 33% today, and then start to increase the utilization factor. Starting off with Section 8 in Maintenance, Work Order, Planning, and Scheduling, the first page we're going to address is our Function Module page, which addresses Function Module 7. And before we get into the data elements in this section, I'd like to address the individual paragraphs that are shown on this particular exhibit. The first paragraph indicates that this function is responsible for maintenance, work order, planning, and scheduling. The second paragraph indicates the interrelationships of the work order, planning, and scheduling function with all of the other, let's call them individual planning and function activities that I have been addressing before, and that's tied in with craft capacity planning, inventory management, the purchasing management system, the storeroom. It is also tied in with the maintenance, work order, labor reporting activity, which we will review when we get into the next section, section number 9, and also the financial maintenance management application, which is the 9th module within the maintenance management program. The maintenance, work order, planning, and scheduling system plans and schedules planned maintenance work orders. And the work order requests, those are the unplanned maintenance work orders after the work order request is converted over into a maintenance work order, cannot be planned. However, they can be scheduled. And the fourth paragraph addresses the data requirements relative to inputting various applications relative to supporting the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system. The first input is from the actual shop calendar. You remember we've addressed that before. Those are what we call fixed requirements relative to maintenance work order planning and scheduling. The second is from machine hour readings, and that is fed directly into the planning and scheduling function. The third are odometer readings that come from either forklift trucks or over-the-road vehicles. And then the fourth is the output of the predictive maintenance program. And most of those readings can be coordinated with machine operators. And then item number 5 addresses the ability to actually schedule the unplanned maintenance work orders, which are actually a byproduct of maintenance work order requests. So moving on to the next pages relative to the record layout. We have 3 pages here, and again, this is for your perusal. You pick and choose the various record layout requirements, but as I have done in the previous exhibits, I'd like to again address the 3 individual columns. The first column on the left is the identification by an alpha code. The middle is the description of that alpha code, and then the right-hand column illustrates the record layout, which is recommended, and again, you develop this based upon your own specific requirements, and then whether that record is alpha driven, whether it's numeric, or it could be a combination of alpha numeric codes. Taking a look at item number A, we have the maintenance work order number, and we indicate that that could be an 8-digit number, and that could be a combination of alpha numeric requirements. And the balance of the record layout on this page and the following 3 are for basically your use, as I've indicated a moment ago. Now, moving on to page number 1, we actually have 2 pages to identify the data elements relative to maintenance work order planning and scheduling. And starting off with page 1, item number 1, we want to address the type of work that we're going to plan and subsequently schedule. And as we have done previously in prior sections, we're going to address the planned requirements and then also the unplanned requirements. The planned requirements are 1, PM work orders, 2, minor overhauls, 3, major overhauls, and 4, projects. The unplanned, in item B, represented by emergency orders. Then we have the maintenance work orders, which are unplanned, and again, they are a byproduct of maintenance work order requests. We could have standing work orders, which represents doing things when, let's say, craft labor is available, such as checking on steam trap leaks, steam pipe leaks, water leaks, and as I've said before, maybe doing some painting on where we have high traffic areas where the walls and other parts of the building could get marred. And then last, we have those miscellaneous requirements, which are work order requests outside of operations, generally in office areas, shipping, receiving, and maybe in the general storeroom, not the maintenance crib. And then we address the shop calendar. And again, as we have in capacity planning, this shop calendar must be identical to the shop calendar that we're using in capacity planning. So we can have a week, let's say, planning and scheduling application. Of course, don't forget this is weeks by weeks out into the future. We could also plan and schedule by day, and we could also plan and schedule by shift. The third element is to take into consideration the craft requirements. And before I move into page number 2, I want to address that the spare parts requirements are going to come from the type of work required, which really addresses both spare parts and the labor. But in step number 3, we have to address the craft requirements from a labor planning standpoint. Now moving on to page number 2, we have special tools that are required and special equipment requirements. And naturally those would be issued out of the storeroom as the spare parts and other materials that are required to support the maintenance work order. We would have to develop the start and completion dates, and that could be a time within a shift, it could be a time within a day, or it could be some other time period where the cumulative time for that work order may be longer than, let's say, a shift is actually utilized in terms of scheduling. We also would schedule the individual work elements, which is the preparation time. And the preparation time is that time to get material and tools and equipment from the storeroom. So the preparation time would be really developed by the storeroom itself. Then there's the travel to and from the job site, and that would be developed by the planner scheduler or schedulers that are supporting the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system. And then the actual work time, and there we would have the individual major steps that craft personnel would have to follow in order to complete a PM task. And then item number 7D pertains to a contingency time for delay, and that is when you first start PM, you may want to allocate 5 minutes or so to the individual PM activities, so that as the PM program commences, that the individual craft personnel would have the ability to have some time to develop their observations, their findings, and most importantly, the recommendations for operating improvement. And item number 8 pertains to additional data that you want to tailor required based upon your own user-defined in maintenance work order planning and scheduling. The screen format that you are reviewing at this time represents the maintenance work order and the ability to schedule that work order. The identical screen format is found in your notebook entitled page 2-1. You'll notice we have the type of maintenance work. And basically, is it planned or unplanned? Is it subcontracted? Is it partially subcontracted? And so forth. That really is an integral part of your definition of the type of work. The shop calendar is the date calendar that you want that specific work to be started or completed. Depends upon whether you're going to do forward or backward scheduling relative to scheduling maintenance work orders. And then you have other data that we discussed on pages 1 and 2, such as the craft requirements, the special tools and equipment, the start and completion date, if there were more time required to complete this than, let's say, your shop calendar would dictate, the different work order time periods, and if you remember, the time periods of the work order would include preparation time, travel to the job site, the actual work performed at the job site, travel from the job site, and then if there was a PM program recently started, you probably may want to have that contingency for a delay that we had discussed. And then down at the bottom of this particular screen format, you can indicate other information as required. And you'll notice what we're basically trying to do is to provide you with some basic information and then give you the opportunity to tailor the work order and its data elements to meet your specific maintenance work order planning and scheduling criteria. Now what we're going to do is look at those time elements on a work order in a little more detail, and this is a standalone section for those time elements, and those are found on page 3. And here again we have the preparation time, and number 1A is obtaining the instructions, which is really the printing out of the PM work order, or it could be a major or minor overhaul. Now this brings a question. Where should the work orders actually be generated? My experience leads us to believe that the work orders should actually be generated in the storeroom. Remember, we could always look at a terminal to determine work orders that are going to be planned in future time periods and those that are subsequently scheduled. But when the work order is actually released, it really should be done in the storeroom, because that's where we would get the necessary spare parts, the tooling, the equipment, and let's say any special documentation that is required. And then we would also have to develop the time elements that's traveled to the job site. Then we'd have the actual maintenance time, and then travel from the job site. And item number 5 is the contingency for delay. So these data elements are in sequence order, and this is the way that I recommend the planned maintenance work orders be developed for both PM and major and minor overhauls. Now this particular exhibit, which is identified in your notebook as page 3-1, addresses the various time elements for a specific work order. This is not the detail that is required to be performed by the craft personnel assigned to the work order. It's a summary. So here again we would show the work order number, the craft code or codes if more than one craft personnel is required, the number of personnel. Then you have your different time elements that we reviewed on the previous screen format. And again, this is a very important exhibit for you to consider having, because you don't have to go through all of the detailed steps to determine what the total time on a work order is being planned and subsequently scheduled. Now you will notice I have not included a summation of all the time elements. Again, I don't know if you want to include contingency time for delay whether you want to have travel to and from the job sites shown separately, as I have in this particular screen format, or whether you want to combine those. Again, you have the opportunity to format this particular exhibit to meet your own specific maintenance work order and planning criteria. Now, continuing on to page number 4, we have some objectives of the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system, and they are noted as follows. The preparation time, we want to drive this to 0. Now, what that means is that the preparation time is charged to the work order, but the people that are actually doing the preparation time is the storeroom. So driving that time to 0 implies that we do not want craft personnel to spend time at the storeroom waiting for planned maintenance work orders to be scheduled and subsequently released. And that is one of the key byproducts of having work orders printed directly in the storeroom. The travel time to and from the job site should be reviewed, and many companies have made intelligent decisions to mobilize, you may call it mechanize, the workforce so that they can actually utilize some form of transportation to and from the job sites, and also from the job site back to, let's say, the maintenance shop. The objective is to keep travel to an absolute minimum and therefore get the highest percentage of utilization out of step number 3, which is the actual work. As far as that delay factor is concerned, after the PM program has been into effect approximately 1 year, that contingency for delay can be dropped. Now, moving on to the next page, page number 5, we want to take a look at some of the key considerations relative to planning and scheduling. And this is part of the training that is required for the planner, scheduler, or schedulers. First of all, we have to determine the type of work. Is it planned or is it unplanned? We have to also determine the date that that activity is to be required. See, I could plan 1 and 2 years in advance, and as I start to move out into time period, those planning dates start to become smaller and smaller, and ultimately we could take the planning period and change it into a scheduling period. And as I've said earlier in this seminar, you can plan out 1, 2, even 3 years in advance, but you only want to schedule no more than 1 to 2 weeks in advance. So therefore, the date required is the date that you actually want to establish the release of that particular maintenance work order. The work required would pertain to the type of personnel that would be required, which is actually addressed in step number 5. But that is it going to be done by one person? Do I need a group of people? Should I subcontract that work out? Should machine operators participate in the maintenance work order, and so forth? The time required is the sum of all of the time elements that are on the maintenance work order. Preparation time would be developed independently of the other times. The travel to and from the job sites, those times would be estimated independently of other times. And then the actual work time would be developed based upon the number of steps required. And in a moment or two, we'll take a look at a maintenance work order planning sheet that could help you to develop the type of planning and scheduling that we're addressing here on page number 5. the craft requirements, which I've already identified. And then what we have to do is to determine, is there any documentation required? And that would be the responsibility of the storeroom to obtain that documentation and again have it available to minimize any preparation time that a craft person has to spend at the storeroom. 7 and 8 pertain to the spare parts, and 8 is the tooling, and 9 is the equipment. And those would be very common items to be issued out of the storeroom. But remember, when we talk about issuing items out of the storeroom, every item must be identified with some type of a permanent identification tag, which would include the part number, the description, the unit of measure, the quantity required, and also on that tag, the work order number. And then item number 10, the consideration of the availability of the equipment or the asset where the work is going to be performed. And these are the key data elements that a planner scheduler has to review on each and every maintenance work order, whether it is planned or unplanned. If it's unplanned, I could still go through these data elements, and that will help me to schedule the unplanned requirements. Now, moving on to page number 6, we have again identified the types of work, and here is the identification of both the planned and unplanned, and we have identified individually the 4 different planned requirements, such as PM, the minor overhauls, the major overhauls, and the projects. And then on the unplanned, we have our emergencies, the work orders that are created from work order requests, the standing work orders, and the miscellaneous orders. And you'll notice that there is a note on the bottom of page number 6 which indicates that unplanned maintenance work orders, except for emergency orders, work orders, can be scheduled. And that means if we were to, let's say, set up some type of a priority code for the work order requests, those priority codes would give the planner scheduler the opportunity to schedule the work order on the assumption that we know what has to be done. So there may be some preliminary work against a work order to actually review the condition of the asset that precipitated the work order request so that we can properly schedule all of the requirements for that unplanned maintenance work order. Now, the next page, page number 7, addresses the job planning sheet that I made reference to a few moments ago. And I want to address the different headings on the job planning sheet so at least you have an opportunity to recognize how this company utilizes this particular job planning sheet. We have in the left-hand major column a heading called Job Sequence. Below that are 2 what I call mini columns, and the left column is the sequence number, which is straight numeric, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. And then there's the description of the work, and that description is in very simplistic terms. Operation 1 or sequence 1 is preparation time. 2 would be travel to the job site. Now 3 would have a series of different sequences depending on the activity that is required, and when I'm through with all of the work, then the next following sequence would be travel from the job site either to the next work order asset or back to the maintenance shop. Now the middle major heading is called manpower planning, and here we have the specific craft, the number of craft personnel, and you'll notice we have the estimated time, which is the time per task man hours. And it is the sum of all of these individual time elements that gives us the total time that is required for that particular maintenance work order. And the last major time or column is the material requirements and or the special tools and equipment and documentation, and that would all be noted on that particular right-hand column. Now, if you look at that particular job planning sheet, you notice that there is no indication of the asset number, the location of the asset, or any other data. This is used strictly for job planning, and the asset information is filled in on the top of this particular exhibit. This exhibit, which is in your notebook as page 7-1, shows the data elements that we reviewed on page number 7. There is some additional information on this particular screen format, such as we're showing you the asset number, the asset description, and the location. And the balance of the data in the body of what we call this job planning sheet would be accomplished by the planner scheduler for this specific asset and for this specific maintenance work order. This is a job plan. Once the job plan has been formalized, it can then be transferred into the planning and scheduling module as a standard work order. And that could be a PM order, it could be a major or minor overhaul, it could also involve, as an example, predictive maintenance applications, or if we are moving toward TPM, total productive maintenance, where we are having machine operators participate in the maintenance activities, then that information would all be applicable to this particular job planning sheet. Now, once the job planning sheet has been applied, we can develop the individual PM and major minor overhauls utilizing a form similar to item or page number 8. Now, I want to reference a couple things. First of all, there are 4 pages that encompasses page number 8 and the balance of the 3 pages. In addition to that, you'll notice that we have a lot of little bubble numbers that are all over this form. Those bubble numbers pertain to pages number 9 and 10, and those are the data elements relative to identifying what the form content consists of, that is by bubble number, and also where that data was originated. And then the last page, on page number 11, will reflect the various frequency codes that are used by this particular company. So first of all, let me start up on the top left-hand column where we have the equipment name, then we have the location, and then we also have the equipment number. So that is heading information that would also appear on the preceding job planning sheet. Now, the second line represents where the data for this PM activity was originated from. And in this case, this company was rather fortunate. They did retain all of the OEM equipment manuals which developed all of their PM and major and minor overhauls. So therefore, The reference maintenance manual is the number, that's the numeric number of the manual. So actually what they did is they laid up all of the manuals side by side and numbered them from 1 until how many they had. It's a quick, easy way to cross-reference the data from this particular PM form back to the manual. The page number represents the page within the manual, and the specification number is this company's terminology for the paragraph within the page. So you can see by following this type of a layout, we're really zeroing in specifically for the data elements that comprise this PM work order. Getting down to the next line, which is the horizontal line, which is the third line. Over on the left, we have the date issued, and then we also have the date started and the date completed. And those could be the same dates, could also be the same shift numbers. We also have, moving to the right, the PM operator name or the badge number, and we also show to the extreme right the job sequence number. That job sequence number is identified by straight numeric units of 1. In other words, the first time I did a specific PM activity, and let's say it's a monthly for illustrative purposes, the first time I performed that monthly PM, the sequence number is 1. The second time I performed that same monthly, the sequence is 2, and so forth. Now, the reason for the sequence number is as follows. We can over PM a particular asset. We likewise could under PM the asset. So as we start to accumulate enough frequencies, that is the number of PMs by PM, let's say frequency code, to a particular asset as a byproduct of the craft observations and findings and recommendations for operating improvement. They may also come back as a byproduct of their observations and findings and indicate that maybe it's not necessary at this point in time to, let's say, change the spare part. And therefore, we could extend the frequency code from monthly to maybe every 6 weeks. So that's the flexibility you can build within your PM program once you start to obtain history relative to PM activities by specific asset. Now, looking at the body of this form, starting off at the left, we have the operation number. Now, that's identical to the previous exhibit we looked at page number 7, where we used the term sequence number. So you have the ability to select any term you want relative to those steps, operations, or sequence numbers. The frequency code is identified, as I said a few moments ago, on page 11, and we'll take a look at some more common frequency nomenclature. In the center, we have the PM requirements. We also, it's not shown here, but here is where the spare parts are identified, the special tooling, equipment, and documentation. And over on the right-hand column, we have the ability to capture all of the comments that we are trying to obtain from our craft personnel while they're on the job. Observations, findings, and recommendations for operating improvement. And down at the bottom, we have the ability to show who originated this PM work order and also the approval of the PM work order. Now, these particular documents are developed for what I would call a document reader. And let me address what I've just said in maybe more basic English terminology. You notice those small lines in the body of the PM form. Those small lines were set to support an IBM Selectric typewriter. So this company did not want to go to a planning sheet first, and then move that data to a PM form, and ultimately put it into CMMS. They wanted to do it in one step. Put it on a form, review it, approve it, and then put it into CMMS. So that this form was designed, again, to be originated by a IBM Selectric typewriter, and once the form was complete, the form would be fed into a document reader. The ink that is on the body portion, that is those horizontal lines, is such that it would not be read by the document reader, and therefore, once the data is fed in, and now we're going to retrieve the data for a specific PM activity, those lines are not printed out. It's a beautiful way to minimize the time and the cost of putting in various PM, major minor overhaul activities into CMMS. Now, I want to move to pages number 9 and 10 and address the data elements that are on page number 8 relative to the various bubble numbers. Looking at page number 9, and at the top left-hand column, we have the form item number. Those numbers that are going down this left-hand column are identical to those bubble numbers by the same item number that is on that PM form. The middle column identifies the form identification, and the right-hand column identifies the form item and how it is used in this particular document. So you could read this at your leisure, and I would recommend that you do go through this, because this is a very nice way to establish not only the data elements on a PM form, but you could take these 4 pages, pages 8 through 11, and put those into your training program, especially the training of PM personnel and all of the planning and schedulers and anyone else that would require the training to interpret the data elements that are on the PM form. Now what I would like to have you do is turn to page number 11, and we're going to look at the different frequency codes. Now remember, these are fixed calendar frequency codes. And the left-hand column is a very common identity using the alpha designation, where we use the numeric along with the alpha designation. We're indicating that it is going to be used several times during a particular annual requirement, such as if I get down to 2M, that means every 2 months that particular PM activity will occur. If I move down further down the list, and I have A, which is annually, and then we have 2A and subsequently 3A. Those represent every 2 years and every 3 years. And then the last frequency code, FR, is a code which identifies something that was prompted by a machine operator. It could have been prompted by a craft person, and the prompt is that something doesn't feel right, it doesn't smell right, there may be a vibration, there may be some heat, associated with a specific condition. Maintenance personnel would review this as an unplanned maintenance work order. And let's assume we can't find anything that really requires repair. Then what we have done is we have indicated an FR code which identifies what that original maintenance work order request had indicated, and every time a PM work order is going to be generated by the PM planning and scheduling system. That notation is on that work order. And at some point in time, that condition could disappear because we have machine conditions that occur like that, or we may find the reason for that particular unplanned maintenance request. But irrespective of whether it disappears or we make a fix, then the FR code disappears. So it is merely a temporary code. So I would suggest that you review these frequency codes, and if you desire, please use the same codes for the frequencies as indicated here on page 11. The exhibit that you are looking at this point is the exhibit in your notebook, which is page 8-1, that I did not address as I reviewed pages 8, 9, 10, and 11 with you. And the reason for that is, if you remember, all of the data elements that are on page number 8 are highlighted by bubble numbers on pages 9 and 10, and page 11 had all of the various frequency codes relative to a PM or major minor overhaul that was done on a fixed calendar basis. But this particular exhibit is a fixed maintenance work order. And if you remember the information that I reviewed with you on Exhibit 7-1, which was the previous screen format, that was for planning purposes. And if you also remember, I indicated once you have finalized the plan, you now can transform that planning work order into a fixed maintenance work order. So here again, we are bridging the gap between planning an activity and then actually developing the documentation to execute the plan. I am not going to go over the data elements that are on this particular exhibit. We did that in quite some detail as we reviewed pages 8 through 11. And again, if there are changes or modifications that you want to incorporate in this particular exhibit, please feel free to make the changes according to your specific requirements. Now, this is the last screen format in section number 8, and we will now continue reviewing the notebook and additional screen formats in sections 9 and 10. Now, moving to pages 12A and 12B, we are identifying the various data elements that you may want to incorporate on a PM form. So the way I would approach this is as follows. Review the data elements that are on pages 12A and 12B. Develop the format of the PM form to meet your specific requirements. In other words, user-defined. Now, let me at least walk through some of the major headings that are on these two pages. On page 12A, the first major heading is heading information, and that is identified by items 1 through 12. Now, here again, I'm not going to, burden you with reviewing each and every data element that is on these two pages. We've already discussed many of these. They're self-explanatory. But here we want you to pick and choose and define your own requirements relative to your PM form and its format. If we come down below item number 12, we have another major heading called PM activity information. And here again, we show the sequences with all of the various requirements that must occur with a PM activity. Now moving to page 12B, we have another major heading called PM reporting information, and this is the data that we would want to have the various PM craft personnel report or record on the PM form. Observations, findings, recommendations for operating improvement, plus time on the job. And last, we have another major heading, which is below item 24, which addresses the PM closeout data requirements. And you could see that there is a significant amount of data on pages 12A and 12B. Please review these and pick and choose and design your own PM form. Once that form is completed, that can be loaded into CMMS, into the planning and scheduling module, and then as PM activities are generated, they will be printed out in the format that you so desire. Remember the first major step in developing CMMS requirements, and that is user-defined. Here you have the ability to define your PM form data elements and where they will appear on your PM form. Now, the next exhibit identifies the steps of implementation of PM. We do have a seminar entitled Preventative Maintenance, and we go through these data elements in great detail. But in this particular exhibit, I merely want to address the timing that it takes to design, implement, and maintain a PM program. As an example, we are using a weekly time period which is noted down in the horizontal column, except that those time periods that we have addressed are in months. But the weekly time period that I'm addressing is 37.5 hours of total available craft capacity per, let's say, person. Now, going to the left-hand vertical column, that represents the number of craft personnel that ultimately may be put into the PM program. And here is the way you should interpret and read this particular exhibit. Number one, the little bar chart that comes off of the first month and it goes up to the first craft personnel, which is in the lower left-hand corner of this particular chart. And then it goes out from periods 1 to period 4, and it shows 37.5 hours of work. What that means is if I'm going to put one person on PM full-time on a weekly basis, and remember, this is at 100% utilization, and my net available plant capacity in this case is 37.5 hours of work per week, then that means I need 37.5 hours of PM activities. If I want to lower that utilization factor down to 45 to 50%, as we talked about in craft capacity planning, then I'm going to drop the number of PM hours that are required. If I put a second person on PM. That means I have to generate 75 hours of work per week for those two people. And here again, we're showing that those two people will be on PM during periods month 4 to month 7. And you could see the steps as it progresses to the right, and as we add more and more personnel to the PM program. What I'm trying to get across here is that you have to start off with planning way in advance of the PM program before you actually implement the schedule. Many PM programs have been started and they have stopped just as fast because planning and scheduling did not go out far enough to do the planning. So if it's going to take you 1 to 2 months to develop PM activities for one craft person, then it may take you another 1 to 2 months to ultimately put 2 craft people into the PM program. This is another key consideration in terms of why it takes a year to 2 years to design and install a PM program, which is really the design and installing of a planned and scheduled maintenance work order system. So again, be cautious. Start the planning process as soon as possible and schedule the amount of craft capacity and hours that it makes sense in your implementation program. Then as you gradually increase the amount of planned capacity hours, you can start to add additional personnel to the PM and other activities like the major and minor overhaul. So this concludes section number 8, which is the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system. And now what I would like to do is to move into section number 9, which addresses the maintenance work order labor reporting activity.